Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. Today we're going to talk about two of my favorite medicinal herbs that are also edible. The first one we're going to do comes out of my spring foraging cookbook, so we'll focus mainly on the edible qualities of mustard. I've already done a show on the medicinal properties. We'll cover a few of the medicinal properties too. Mustard is like really my favorite green, and wild mustard was probably the first green I learned to eat, and I am a huge fan of wild mustard. We'll talk about how to cook the greens so you can enjoy them. There's not much difference really between wild mustard and garden mustard. Wild mustard can be a little tougher and all that. We'll also talk about how to use the seeds to make the condiment mustard. We'll talk a lot about this. It's really a family of plants. And then we're going to get into violets. Viola, really one of my favorite medicinal herbs, and this is a big one. I got a lot of information on violets that'll probably really surprise you. One of the most important medicinal herbs, and yes, also quite edible. Violet blossoms were the first things to come up in spring. I'll do a show in a few weeks actually on the edible qualities of violets, but I can just tell you they're an excellent addition to salads, or you can put them in sugar to flavor the sugar with that violet scent, or you can candy them. And there's a lot of things you can do with violets. You can actually make a violet wine if you actually had enough of the flowers. But before we get into that, I want to remind you that we're coming up on Christmas. And my books make wonderful Christmas gifts. If you want a hard copy, get it from Amazon. They'll have it to you quickly. Go ahead and order now so you can get it under the tree, right? Thanksgiving's this week. I know a lot of people put up their trees like Thanksgiving Day or the day after. I never do. But if you do, you want to go ahead and get those gifts under that tree, right? You can always order an ebook from me, but it is nice to give somebody the gift of a hard copy. Or for yourself, you can give yourself a gift too. But one thing I'm doing, it's a special I'll be doing through the end of the year. And this can be it's a great last minute gift. I know a lot of people did this last year. Of course, it's a good gift to do in advance as well. My Judson Carroll Master Herbalist newsletter. It's a Substack newsletter. You'll see the link for it in the show notes. It's only $8 a month to subscribe to that. And whenever somebody subscribes to it, I send them a free ebook. I say, which one do you want? And, I send them a PDF. And it's a good value because, I sell those PDFs for $9.99, and it's only $8 a month to get the subscription to the newsletter. And that's even if you just pay for 1 month. Even if you just had it for 1 month, you save $2 on the book. Well, what I'm going to do between now and the end of the year is give you 2 ebooks. So this is essentially a $20 value for $8. You can keep one for yourself. You can keep both of them for yourself. You can give both of them to the person you bought the subscription for. Wonderful last minute gift or in advance. And, especially if someone interested in herbal medicine, maybe a young person starting out studying, maybe an older person starting out studying, a young parent that might want to learn to care for their kids. Anybody in a situation where they want to learn herbal medicine, hey, for $8, you get access to everything in my newsletter. That's 200 plus episodes of this podcast. 100 plus episodes of my Herbal Medicine for Preppers podcast. That goes for the Prepper Broadcasting Network. They also allow me to send it out in my newsletter. So that's a really nice bonus right there. So easily 300 hours of verbally taught herbal information. Ebooks. I mean, like I said, I've written 15 books. Pick 2 of them. I'll send them to you. And you got those. You can keep them. You can share them. If you want to keep both copies for yourself and give 2 copies to the person you bought the subscription for, I'm not going to know, and I don't care. I want to see the information spread, right? I mean, it's just like if you bought a book and you loaned it to a friend or you gave the copy away or sold it in a used bookstore or whatever, It's just important for me to get the information out there. And every week, I mean, probably a lot of my podcast listeners don't know this if you're not already a subscriber to the Judson Carroll Master Herbalist newsletter. I send out an article that's a full monograph for an herb, and these things can be sometimes 15 pages long. Every bit of information, and see, all that is actually stored in the archives at judsoncarroll.com. So if you give an aspiring herbalist a subscription to the newsletter, they're going to have more information available than they can get at any herb school in the entire world. Nobody offers this much information. And, I'm glad to do it. This enables me to make a living following my passion. And my passion is teaching people these skills, whether it's herbal medicine, whether it's cooking, whether it's, woodcraft and carving things, or survival skills in the woods, or fishing, or any of those things. Playing music. I'm going to start a series soon on how to play the mandolin. That's going to be in January. So for an $8 purchase, that's for 1 month. Of course, you could buy them a 6-month subscription or a year subscription, or you could just buy it for 1 or 2 months, right? For an $8 purchase, look at what they get. I mean, literally, I would have flipped out when I was learning herbal medicine. I mean, I started my apprenticeship at 15. We did not have the internet. Al Gore had not invented the internet yet, right? So before Al Gore's wonderful internet, you had to find old people to teach you stuff and read books. And so I did my apprenticeship with the Hicks family. They were elderly folks that lived up in the mountains, and I've read hundreds of books, and I then went and took many, many classes. I have over 270 hours of formal education in herbal medicine and related topics. And I don't even know, dozens of certificates. That's why I just call myself Master Herbalist. I probably have more formal education than just about anybody, plus a full apprenticeship. And one of those certificates I have actually says Master Herbalist, so I get to call myself that. There's actually, there's no governing body. So that's really important. When you learn herbal medicine, you want to learn from somebody who really knows what they're doing, really knows what they're talking about. And it took me, 15, 20, 25 years of apprenticeship and formal education and reading and using herbs before I would have ever felt comfortable, even if I had earned, gone through a course and earned the right to use, the title Master Herbalist. I wouldn't have felt comfortable hanging that out as my shingle. It does take years of study and practice, decades really, and you give somebody an $8 subscription for Christmas, and they get all that information. They get a lifetime's experience for free because you bought them the gift. And I mean, I think it's a pretty great gift, actually. And don't forget, I do carve wood. I carve wooden spoons and spatulas and bowls and all that. Handmade, just trees from my yard and a knife and an axe. That's it. A gouge sometimes, but hand tools, no power tools. You can check all that out at Judson Carroll Woodcraft. That's also a Substack newsletter. You can put in judsoncarrollwoodcraft.substack.com, I think it's the full thing, or just Google Judson Carroll Woodcraft. It'll take you right there. Each piece handmade. Each piece takes hours to make. Actually longer than that when you think about cutting up the tree and, cleaving the wood with a froe and then cutting out the blank and then carving it with a knife and then scooping it. I mean, really, I put a lot into these. Each piece is a quality piece to be used in the kitchen, an heirloom you can pass down for generations. So if that interests you, that's a wonderful gift for somebody that may not even have an interest in herbal medicine. And of course, I've written 2 cookbooks, The Omnivore's Guide to Home Cooking and The Spring Foraging Guide, which we'll get to now. Those are, well, The Omnivore's Guide, everybody loves. I mean, that's like my top rated book. Everybody just, nobody has disliked it. I mean, from professional chefs to home cooks to young couples starting out. I mean, everybody's like, this is amazing. This is an entire cooking course in a book. And yeah, it really is. I teach you like from scratch, literally the way my mother and my grandmother taught me from a very young age. I put it in the book, and I've worked in commercial kitchens, and I'm pretty, kind of. I got some skills as a chef. Let's just put it that way. But I do this in a way that somebody who's never cooked, doesn't even know how to boil an egg, can start and learn. So that's the Omnivore's Guide. Maybe you got somebody who's into hiking and such. The Spring Foraging Cookbook would be a great option. And I've written, I guess, 4 Catholic books now. I do books of daily gospel reflections based on the Mass readings. There's one, I put them out every 6 months. You can get the one for January. What a great Christmas gift that would be. If you got a Christian in your life, especially Catholic, but, it'd be appreciated, I think, by any denomination. Every day they can open the book and they can read the gospel for that day and my commentary on it. And usually I have some pretty good commentary, actually. People like that a lot. I actually have another Substack newsletter called The Uncensored Catholic and a podcast that goes along with that. That's another option. You could buy a subscription to the Uncensored Catholic podcast. And sometimes I think it's just listed as Judson Carroll podcast. But anyway, and I'll give you a couple free ebooks there. You can get, I guess in terms of Catholic books, that would be my conversion story. I was Baptist who became Catholic, or the Daily Gospel Reflections. Well, and then I've got like some crossover too, like the Christian History of Herbal Medicine. That's one that talks a lot about religion and history and herbal medicine. So all those books are available in hard copy on Amazon. All those books are available for ebooks, and whether you choose the Herbal Podcast or the Uncensored Catholic Podcast, I'm going to give you 2 free ebooks for a minimum charge of $8, which is insane. I mean, you cannot beat that. Or, go to Judson Carroll Woodcraft and check out my spoons and bowls. I got a beautiful little salt bowl on there right now. It's shaped like a bird, carved out of wild cherry. I just think I like that. Anyway, there's some great, I actually just finished last night on 2 cooking spoon set, a big cooking spoon and then a smaller one, matched pieces, book match from the same piece of cherry. The grains are almost identical. Cherry has wavy grains, so it's not going to be completely identical. Probably some of the best work I've ever done. Those, it'll be $50 for the set, and it's free shipping. I just, within the continental United States, I don't make you worry about calculating the shipping. I just take that out of the price. And yeah, they're beautiful, really. I hand sign each one with a wood burning pen, a little pyrography pen. Very collectible, and there's with a grain pattern in the large spoon, it's just gorgeous. It really is some of the finest work I've ever done. So those will be live on the site Monday morning, I guess the Monday the 25th when this podcast is released. So check that out if that interests you, and I hope I can be part of your family Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever. Yeah, ebooks make great Hanukkah presents. But anyway, you have usually smaller gifts over a period of days, and $8 is pretty darn reasonable there, I think. So anyway, let's go ahead and talk about mustard. Now, mustard's in the Brassica family, and there are several varieties of mustard. And generally speaking, all are descendant of okay, there's several plants that have been called mustards over time. There's hedge mustard and garlic mustard. Those are not true mustards. The ones that we use both in the garden, we grow it in the garden, or we use the seeds to make the mustard condiment, are all descendants of the wild mustard, the wild mustard that was well known in Asia and Greece and Egypt and all that. I mean, they found mustard seeds in the tomb of King Tutankhamun, right? It was used as they just took the seeds and sprinkled them on salad to give them a little, zing. They used them as a spice. And let me think. Ancient Samaria, I believe, was the first time we really see the seeds mixed with, what was it mixed with? Must, actually. Yeah, I think it was, no, in that case, it was the seeds mixed with unripe grape juice, pressed juice from unripe grapes. It's called, oh, I'm forgetting the name of it. Very popular in ancient Greek and Roman cooking. It's very sharp. It's like vinegar. So that's when we start to see like the first kind of mustard condiment. Really, as far as eating the leaves, we don't have a lot of historical knowledge on that until we get to the Roman era. The Romans loved to eat mustard as a pot herb. It's believed that the ancient Anglo-Saxons were eating it going back to ancient times and the Celts and all that. But when the Romans basically took over Britain, they spread the eating of mustard greens into those cultures. So we don't really know how long the Britons and Anglo-Saxons and Celts had been eating mustard, but we know by the time of the Roman conquest, it had become very popular. I mean, the Romans carried mustard seeds with them and would toss them out as they marched along, knowing when they came back they'd have a field full of mustard greens because it's a weedy plant. Well, when I was a kid, we were growing mustard in the garden. I absolutely loved it, and I'm looking across the fence over in the pasture. I'm like, I'm asking my grandmother, isn't that mustard growing over there? She says, wild mustard. And I'm like, oh, well, why don't we eat that? She said, we could. And it was just a little tougher, a little bit more peppery, and I actually absolutely loved it. So whether it's the true wild mustard or it's mustard that have escaped from people's gardens, it's one of the most common wild edibles you're going to find, and one of the first that comes out in spring. That has made it an absolute survival food for generations. In early America, mustard was a very popular pot herb. And those gardens, birds spread the seeds, and it's just gotten everywhere. Mustard, we're still mustard fanatics in the South. I mean, you cannot get through fall and winter and early spring without eating a ton of mustard greens, which I absolutely love. Now, modern garden mustards have been bred to be a little more mild and tender, but they're very hot when eaten raw. If you've ever eaten a raw mustard leaf, it's got that horseradish type punch to it. It's the same kind of spices. They're in the same family. When cooked, they become more mild. They're just slightly bitter, and they lose that peppery flavor. So, of course, I serve them with hot pepper vinegar. That's usually apple cider vinegar in which hot peppers have been pickled. And that's a must for me. I mean, some people don't put vinegar on their mustard greens. They save it for collards. I put hot pepper vinegar on all greens because I love it. And usually eat some pickled jalapenos along with it because I like spicy stuff, right? This is the absolute perfect accompaniment to like a pork chop, fried chicken, anything. I mean, mustard greens, absolute Southern staple. And really, the only real difference between the wild and the domesticated ones are the wild ones are hotter, and the seeds are hotter as well. So those are actually my preference for making the condiment because I like a nice hot, spicy, punchy mustard. And they just take a little more chewing if you're eating the leaves, the greens. They are a little tougher, and you'll need to remove the stems. Whereas the cultivated ones are tender enough, you don't have to take the stems out. With the mild, you will. The extra chewing is well worth it for the leaves, but the stems are just too tough. They'll get stringy, and you'll just end up spitting them out. So you might as well just pull them out, before then. But wild mustard has a lot of flavor. Now, I told you this before. The way my grandmother cooked all the greens is the way I cook them today. We don't put a lot of junk in our greens. We want to taste the greens. So get yourself some fatback or bacon. Yes, you can use some other fat if you prefer, if you want to use olive oil, whatever. But I'm going to go with fatback or bacon because those flavors work really well together. Render it down in a pan so you get some good grease. Take your greens and wash them. They usually have a little sand on them. About a pound per person would be right. After they're washed, just kind of shake the water off. Drop them straight into the pot. There's enough water on them to start steaming and cooking them down in the pork fat. And add salt to taste. Serve with hot pepper vinegar. That's as simple as it gets. I mean, it's just absolutely the only thing. Never put a lid on the pan. All members of the brassica family release sulfur gases as they cook, and these must be allowed to gas off, whether mustard collards, turnips, kale, yeah, even kale. It's more mild in that regard, but yeah, even kale. Cabbage should really be cooked uncovered. Most people don't know to do this, and if you don't, your greens get brown and bitter. kind of olive drab gray. If you cook them with the lid off, they'll stay bright green and have a much fresher, sweeter flavor. And a lot more people would like greens if they had been served that way instead of the way they're normally served, which is, sort of an abomination, actually. People say, well, the greens stink, you got to put a lid on. Well, they're going to stink either way. But that sulfur gas goes up there to the pot lid and mixes with the steam and drips back down on the greens and just kills the flavor and a lot of the nutritional value. Um, some people do cook their greens with broths and spices and sugar. That's probably because they've been cooking them wrong, and they're trying to counter that kind of bitterish, not good flavor that comes when you cook them with the lid on. If you cook them uncovered, you don't need to add a thing to them. They're fantastic. Now, if you want to add something to them, hey, it's your greens. Cook them however you want, right? Throw whatever you like in there. If you want to put in, a lot of people like smoked turkey with their greens, especially collards. But yeah, or they'll put in some hog jowls. That's really good. If that's your thing. Some people add a little sugar. Some people add some chicken broth. Not me. I just like my greens cooked with pork fat and salt, hot pepper vinegar, and I am good to go. And definitely a piece of cornbread to go with it, because you've got to have some cornbread to sop up. That's what we call pot liquor. And pot liquor was the Southern cure-all for like the last 200 years. My grandfather, great-grandparents, all of them, they would save the liquid in which collards or mustard, any kind of greens cooked. And if your stomach felt a little bit off, or you'd take a swallow of pot liquor, and it was bitter. It's good for the liver. It's good for digestion. It's tonic, right? There's a medicinal property of mustard. Also, if you were sick and hadn't been able to eat for a while, you've been throwing up, you would take that pot liquor and cook some cornmeal in it and make a gruel, and that's what people would eat. And it's because the bitterness and the tonic effect of the greens help settle the stomach, and the cornmeal gives you some carbohydrates, and you got a little fat in there from the fat back, and you can gradually, it was considered food for invalids, and it's in a lot of the old cookbooks do recommend doing that. Now, as far as the condiment, in my rarely humble opinion, wild mustard seed makes the best mustard condiment. In the old books, you'll find many recommendations about selecting black, brown, or white mustard seed, depending on your tolerance for heat and spice. The English and the French were really big into breeding mustard specifically for the seed to make their wonderful mustards. Okay, French Dijon mustard, La Maille, it is peerless. Okay, it's really good. It's a little salty, but it's really good. The English have traditionally made a very spicy brown mustard. Almost impossible to find in America these days. I don't know why. We used to carry it when I was a kid. I loved it. It's like a punch you in the mouth hot mustard. Very different from the French variety. Of course, the Germans often put horseradish in there, so they make it with beer, whereas the French use wine, and the English usually use vinegar. Just different tastes for different peoples. But this all comes from the original mustard, and if you get wild mustard, it's not so specific. You have no idea what you're going to be getting, but it's going to end up being pretty darn punchy and flavorful, and that's what I really like it. And there are also other plants that bloom about the same time as mustard. One of them we've covered recently. The name's not coming to me, but it has seeds. You can mix in, there's actually several in the brassica families that you may end up combining with wild mustard seeds, because they're actually kind of hard to tell apart sometimes. I don't remember, I think is it 800 varieties of brassica that we've domesticated for food? I can't remember if it's 200 or 800. Any way you look at it, they're more than most of us will ever encounter. But anyway, wild mustard seeds are hot and bold. And you can make a better mustard condiment than anything you can buy in a store simply by filling a jar about halfway full of whole seeds, adding a good quality of vinegar and some salt. That's how easy it is. When you see whole grain mustard, it's generally just mustard seeds, vinegar, and salt. And you're going to get a depth of flavor you could never imagine. Now, you can add anything you like to that basic mix, okay, of seeds, vinegar, and salt. And in terms of vinegar, you can use any wine vinegar you want. You can use rice wine vinegar if you want that flavor. You could use apple cider vinegar. I wouldn't use balsamic, though, because I don't like sweet mustard. Now, if you're into honey mustard, maybe play around with balsamic, but that's not my thing. It's just too thick, too sweet. If I wanted a sweeter mustard, I might use sherry vinegar. That wouldn't be too bad, or the rice wine. But I don't have that much of a sweet tooth. Malt vinegar makes that very, very traditional British tasting mustard. I think it works very well. Actually, malt vinegar is real traditional in a lot of English cooking. It's what you have with your fish and chips, and I don't know, it's got a real English taste to it to me. White wine vinegar is what you would use in a French style, a Dijon style mustard. Um, you would use either whole seeds or finely ground seeds. It was actually, I think it was an English lady who invented mustard flour. And that's what most of our mustards, the real smooth, like the stuff you put on a hot dog, is made from mustard flour. So you can mill that yourself if you want to, or you can just break up the seeds or leave them whole. Um, I like a whole grain mustard, so I usually leave them whole, and I don't like giving myself a lot of extra trouble either. But I can run through a few through the mortar and pestle. But if you want to do the German style mustard, just leave the seeds whole. Use vinegar of your choice, some grated horseradish, and some dark beer, and that's very good. You can flavor your vinegars with herbs. Tarragon is really classic. Tarragon mustard, very French. You can make it sweet if you want to. Just don't tell me about it. You can make it hot. You can actually add, hot peppers in there. You can use aromatics. Whatever you want to do. It's your mustard, right? Say you wanted to do a fermented mustard, which is what I often do. Instead of vinegar, I'll put in just salt and some sour kombucha, a few herbs, and just a teaspoon of sugar, just to give the kombucha something to eat while it gets going. And it's really good. It'll just ferment right there in the jar, and after it gets sour enough to your taste, pop it in the fridge, and it'll keep forever. Um, yeah, I usually add some black peppercorns, maybe some dried hot pepper, spice it up. Ginger and garlic, really good in mustard. Yeah, either together or separately. Let it ferment till it stops bubbling, and it'll get better as it ages in the fridge. I mean, it's going to be good fresh, but it's amazing after it's had a while for those flavors to really come together and get that depth of flavor, which is so good. Now, mustard greens very often used in Asian cooking, much more so than modern European cooking. Although, as I said, it was once a staple. Chinese, Koreans, etc., really love their mustard greens. I would say as much as do Southerners. And in most any Asian grocery store, you're going to find pickled mustard, and these are fermented, just like cabbage and sauerkraut. Of course, different cultures add different spices and flavorings, but I have yet to discover a mustard green that were really heavily spiced like the cabbages and kimchi, but I also haven't found one I don't like. Pickled mustard greens are really good. And you can pickle any brassica. You can make a kraut or pickle of any member of the brassica family. Like I've said, you can use collard stems, you can use collard leaves, you can use kale, you can use broccoli stems, just peeled and cut up. And you just do them with a salt brine. I usually add a little kombucha. Do it just like sauerkraut. But yeah, pickled mustard greens are particularly good. And then a lot of Asian soups include mustard greens. I usually make just a chicken broth with chicken carcass, leftover bits of meat, boil it down, pick the meat off the bones, take the bones out of the broth, of course. And when I'm ready to eat, just add some garlic, onion, ginger. Maybe some mushrooms, maybe celery sometimes not. It totally changes the flavor. Celery is a very potent seasoning, actually. Pinch of cilantro is really good. You could do a dash of five spice, crushed red pepper, and star anise, cinnamon, clove. Just salt and pepper to taste, a little soy sauce, and toss in your chopped mustard greens raw. Let them cook in the soup, and really quite good. If you want a little texture in there, a little bulk, of course you got to add the meat back into the bowl, as you serve it. A few water chestnuts are good. Just simmer them in the soup until the flavor comes together. Pasta, if you want to bulk it up more, just toss in anything from egg noodles to spaghetti. I mean, rice noodles, I love rice noodles, but even cheap ramen. Just don't use the flavor package. Toss it in there. It's really good, actually. Usually, I'll wait to add soy sauce or sesame oil until it's in the bowl, and I'll just add a few drops of sesame oil and, a little soy sauce to taste. And mustard greens are really a favorite for that kind of soup, but anything from dandelion leaves, chicory, cabbage, spinach, anything's going to work really well in that soup. It's just like my all-purpose, you know, round eye Asian style soup. It's what I came up with, just by, using some traditional ingredients and flavors I had had in restaurants. And you can actually throw a lot of different greens in there and enjoy it. So now let's talk about the violets, the viola family. And it's a big one. You got everything from the little wood violets that pop up around my house in the spring, one of the first wild edibles, to Johnny Jump Ups. What's the other name for that? Pansy, I think. They're brightly colored, taller, bigger. They're white violets. So violet, is a color, but they're also white violets. That can confuse people, but not African violets. African violets are a completely different species and are poisonous. We're talking about the viola, Viola arvensis, Viola bicolor, probably a couple others. So. And not long ago, the humble violet was among the most important foods in the Appalachian Mountains. After cold winters of eating dried, salted, and smoked foods, this was one of the first edible greens, and the flowers were essential to prevent scurvy. They're anti-scorbutic. They have vitamin C in them. And, people have been just living off of sauerkraut and dried apples, potatoes, and the violets were considered a blood cleanser, a spring tonic. It would help prevent sickness. And people really knew the importance of violets. There are over 600 varieties. And so you'd find them growing in people's flower gardens or in their vegetable gardens. And the woods were full of them. And, as a kid, you would have learned to go out and gather violets in the spring, and it would have been part of your diet. And, that's really just so much of what I'm trying to get people to go back to. That interactive relationship with their environment. With the seasons, with the soil. And because, like I've said, my grandparents lived to be 94, 96, 101. I mean, we can go back through my family, and almost everybody lives to be 100 years old until the 1980s. The first generation to really eat a lot of processed foods and take modern prescriptions and live that use agricultural chemicals. They started dying earlier and getting diseases that their parents never even heard of. I mean, my great-grandmothers had their babies at home. They'd go to a doctor if they had a heart attack, maybe. If they broke a leg, well, even if they broke a leg, they probably put a splint on it and do it at home. I mean, people just did not spend half their life in a doctor's office taking pounds of pills every day, and somehow they lived to be very old. And that's how I got to know my great-grandparents, because my great-grandfather, born in 1880, was alive until I was, 6, 7? My other great-grandparents lived to be, 96 and 94? So, I mean, I knew them till I was well into my teens. I mean, I got to grow up with them. That's kind of rare these days. Plus all kinds of great aunts and uncles and all that. Now people are lucky if they even know their grandparents. But anyway. So let's talk about the violets. Okay, so violets are mentioned in much of the earliest recorded information on herbs. Homer mentions violets as being used in ancient Greece to moderate anger. Isn't that interesting? Theophrastus mentions violets as an herb of Zeus and discussed its use in garlands. And Pliny, as they say, Pliny the Elder, gives us 17 remedies derived from the violet. He said there are both wild and cultivated violets. The purple violet is of a cooling nature. For inflammations, they are applied to the stomach in the burning heats, and for pains of the head, they are applied to the forehead. Violets in particular are used for deflections of the eyes, prolapse of the fundament and uterus, and suppurations. Worn in chaplets upon the head, or even smelt, they dispel the fumes of wine and headache. So he thought it could actually sober you up and help with a headache. And taken in water, they are a cure for quinsy. The purple violet taken in water is a remedy for epilepsy. In children, most particularly, the violet seed is good for stings of scorpions. On the other hand, the flower of the white violet opens suppurations, and the plant itself disperses them. Both the white and yellow violet check menstrual discharge and act as diuretic. When freshly gathered, they have less virtue, and hence it is that they are mostly used dry after being kept a year. The yellow violet, taken in doses of, old measurement, ceanthus, I'm not even try to translate that, promotes the catamenia, and the root supplied with vinegar assuage affections of the spleen, as also the gout. Mixed with myrrh and saffron, they are good for inflammations of the eyes. The leaves applied with honey cleanse ulcerate sores of the head, and combined with rarate, I'm not sure what that is. They're good for chaps of the fundament and other moist parts of the body. That's essentially the perineum, by the way. Employed with vinegar, they affect the cure of abscesses. A few hundred years later, Dioscorides wrote violet. They called it in, I guess he was writing in Latin, is that right? Yeah, about what, 60 AD? Anyway, ion. And it says, ion has a leaf smaller than cissus and thinner and darker, and I'm not going to get into all those descriptions, but he said it smells sweet, it's purple, it grows near the woods. So it's violets. And a decoction of the purple part, let's see, wait. The leaves applied by themselves or with polenta, and they didn't have corn as we know it at the time. They actually made it out of ground wheat, so essentially cream of wheat. Help a burning stomach, applied to the eyes and prolapse of the perineum. A decoction of the purple part of the flower, taken as a drink with water, helps an abscessed throat and the epilepsy of children. I don't know how, I don't know why, but this is two authors that say it. It's worth a shot, right? It is also called, we don't need to get into all the names of the different cultures called it. Violet was much used in monastic medicine in the Middle Ages, but was not included in the officina, and that's probably because it grew too commonly everywhere to require any cultivation in the physic gardens of the monks and nuns. Those were the gardens where they grew their medicinal herbs, but you could just walk out and pick violets, so they didn't actually have to cultivate them. So St. Hildegard recommended violets infused in oil applied to the eyelids before sleeping for foggy eyes, cloudy, foggy eyesight. She recommended violets infused in wine for melancholy and aching lungs. And for a heavy head or kidneys with a dull ache, she recommends violets infused in fat, a salve, essentially a salve. And violets contain salicin. It's one of the plants that contains salicin, which is the origins of aspirin. So salicin from violets, masterwort, willow, poplar, wintergreen, I believe, has some salicin. There's one other that's just escaping me right now. That's ancient aspirin. That's what people used before the Bayer company figured out how to make a synthetic form and put it in a little white tablet. Continuing in the German tradition, Father Nape said, "This pretty little fragrant spring flower shall fill our apotheca also with its salutary perfume." Love the way the man wrote. He was a monk, a priest in the mid-1800s, and he had a beautiful way of writing. Very, I think it was Bavarian, so much more in the Bavarian style than the more Germanic way of writing that we're more familiar with. Poetic. He was very poetic. When in the beginning of springtime the children get a bad cough in consequent of frequent changes in the weather, the anxious mother boils a handful of green or dried violet leaves and a half a pint of water, and gives the children 2 or 3 spoonfuls of such a tea every 2 or 3 hours. The roots of the plant may be used too, but they must be crushed before boiling. Adults are cured of whooping cough by taking a cup of this tea 3 times a day. Likewise, it relieves the cough of consumptive people and assists in loosening phlegm. Serves as a medicine, should be taken as such in 3 to 5 tablespoons every 2 to 3 hours. And he used herbs and cold water baths to cure his tuberculosis. So his recommendations on anything concerning lungs and coughs and all that, and congestion, usually pretty spot on, and definitely one of the it's good to learn from someone who has real hands-on personal experience using the herbs, and he certainly did. He says this tea serves farther against headache and a great heat in the head. A piece of linen is moistened with violet leaf tea and bound across the forehead, or better still, the head, especially the back of the head, is washed with such a decoction. For a swollen throat, this tea is a tested gargle. At the same time, the throat may be bandaged and applied, dipped in the decoction, so like a poultice somewhat around the throat. Those who suffer from difficulty breathing, which, however, is more the result of gathered gases and morbid matter in the stomach and bowels. Well, what does that mean? Well, actually, if you get a lot of gas on the stomach, a lot of indigestion, it really can make you quite breathless. I mean, it can restrict your breathing. He said such people should undertake a course of Violetta, i.e., they should drink daily some time two large. Let me see if I can get that right. 2 large or 3 smaller cups of this tea. Crushed violet leaves bound as a compress, that was the word I was searching for, not poultice, compress, on inflamed tumors have a cooling effect. If boiled in vinegar, they will heal gout. Rejoice at the fragrance of the lovely blue color of many a bunch of violets, but keep also a little supply of this medicinal herb in your home or dispensary, that it may still breathe its fragrance for those who are sick, at a time when the little spring flower has long since faded. Doesn't he write beautifully? He did. It was actually the most popular book in the world next to the Bible. It was called My Water Cure, and was probably the first book ever counterfeited. People wrote fake versions of his book in other languages to profit off its popularity. His protege was Brother Aloysius, and he recommended sweet violet or Viola odorata, used for lung disorders, measles, scarlet fever, smallpox, throat infections, and podagra. Violet's popularity was by no means so just confined to the Germanic nations. In Poland, according to Sophie Hoderick's Nab, violet was included in head wreaths worn by virgins before marriage, which is a very important tradition there. They have these beautiful wreaths, and they use flowers a lot in their religious ceremonies. They're all Catholic, well, mostly anyway. And these traditions that go back really to the beginning of Christianity, and that were merged with their folk traditions of decorating with a lot of flowers, and it's a beautiful culture, and probably the most intact herbal tradition in the entire world. Really, because modernity has affected traditional Chinese herbalism quite a bit, and we're pretty eclectic here in the Americas. We merge cultures. Poland, their big influence would be Germany and, certainly Rome, but Russia. And so you see a lot of crossover there. And then the Ashkenazi Jews that settled in the area. But they are the largest grower, producer, and user of herbal medicine in all of Europe. So it's a wonderful culture. And I love Polish food. And Polish women are just beautiful. And they really are. I mean, really, really are. Anyway, let's see. She said that a decoction of violets is ingested like a tea for whooping cough. For a cold, gather leaves of violet with the dew still on them, boil and drink. And Polish people are also incredibly friendly and really love Americans. It's probably the most pro-American of all European nations, by the way. In Russia, according to Igor Vilovich Zevin, Viola tricolor is called Anuda's eyes because the petals appear to be the laughing eyes of a happy young lady. I love that too. An infusion of the herb is a good remedy for treating acute respiratory diseases like bronchitis and whooping cough. It also tends to reduce inflammation of the trachea. Pansy, or Viola tricolor, is also useful for inflammation of the urinary tract and is a common folk remedy for treating kidney stones. A pansy infusion is an effective remedy for treating inflammations of the gastrointestinal tract and is used to treat symptoms of dysentery. Russian herbalists also prescribe pansy infusion for treating arterial sclerosis, arthritis, joint inflammation, especially rheumatism, gout, rickets in children, and as a preventive remedy for people who have previously suffered heart attacks. He said that dentists prescribe a pansy gargle for the inflammations of the mouth from periodontal disease. Retaining a mouthful of pansy gargle for several minutes, not 7, but probably 3, is often recommended for relieving toothache. In folk medicine, he says, pansy tea is taken internally for cough. Pansy washes and compresses are widely used to treat a variety of skin diseases, including itching, eczema, psoriasis, and allergic dermatitis, blackheads, and furunculosis. Now, the Ashkenazi Jews spread much of the herbal medicine from the Middle East. I mean, They not only had their own tradition, according to ancient Jewish history. A, Noah was taught by the archangel Raphael how to use all the herbs, medicinal herbs, and they said that's the source of their herbal medicine. They also learned from the Egyptians, who had an amazing school of herbal medicine, the Babylonians, the Sumerians, and then as they mingled with the Romans and Greeks, they learned all the herbal medicines of all these nations. What was the King of Pontus, Mithridates? I mean, this was a culture that had really advanced herbal medicine. So after the fall of Jerusalem, when what was about 60 years after the crucifixion of Christ, Rome leveled Jerusalem, tore down the temple, crucified and executed tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of Jews. Nobody knows how many. And the rest were dispersed throughout Europe. They moved a bunch of people from Jordan in, who you might know from the Bible as the Philistines, and settled them in Jerusalem and called it Palestinia, because that was the Roman pronunciation of Philistine, as a further insult to the Jews, because the Philistines and Jews had been mortal enemies all along. So that's how the Palestinians got to Israel, okay? That's how the whole Palestinian Jewish conflict started, was when Rome took a bunch of them basically out of Jordan, settled them in modern-day Israel, and called it Palestinia. So now you know the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey would say. Well, the Jews that survived were dispersed throughout Europe. Some settled in Rome. A lot of them went up to modern-day Germany, Ukraine, Poland. And they took Middle Eastern herbalism and mixed it with Central European herbalism. And that's one of the major influences on the Germanic and Slavic herbal traditions. And Deatra Cohen and Adam Siegel have written a wonderful book called Ashkenazi Herbalism. They listed Viola mirabilis as saying a decoction or infusion of the whole plant or only the leaves and flowers was used for treatment of heart trouble, palpitations, and shortness of breath by folk healers in a lot of towns I can't pronounce, a lot of too many consonants like Lachovics and Machlin. I have no idea. The remedy book of Yoel Baal Shem also summons the root of the violet in his recipe for coughs, shortness of breath, and heart pains. Viola Hirata in Bard. I'm not going to pronounce these names. There are a lot of towns over there that are unpronounceable to an American. Trust me. My dear Ukrainian friend was always teasing me about not being able to pronounce the name of basically anything in Ukraine or Poland, or Russia for that matter. Said a decoction of the entire plant, including the roots, was given in cases of heart trouble and shortness of breath. The remedy is further confirmed by a separate study of the Podolia region that includes some places. They noted that the wild pansy, or Viola tricolor, was looked to by community healers as a remedy for heart palpitations and coughs. Now, of course, this has a little salicin in it, so how you take an aspirin for your heart, probably a lot has to do with that. Viola forget it. Another variety of violet. Decoction of the plant was given by folk healers in the treatment of heart diseases in the community of somewhere. Someone actually got in touch with me and said, "Why don't you learn how to pronounce these things before you do a podcast?" I've done 200 and some episodes on 500 different herbs with different cultures from all over the world. I can't store all that information in my head. I get it written down, I refer to my notes, and that's the best I can do. Sorry if that offends you, but I'll match. Never mind. I'm not gonna continue on that. Let's see. Viola Riviana. It says traditional healers gave it an infusion of the herbs, leaves, and flowers for relief of heart pain. Now, violets were much used in the British tradition. Gerard wrote of 21 varieties of violets and false violets. So, of violets, he specifically said, there are many that might be described. under the name of violet if their differences should be more curiously looked into than is necessary. We might treat them hereunto as the same, essentially. And he gives a lot of folk names for it, but we'll just go with violet. He really apparently liked violets. He was a great gardener, and he grew a lot of them in the garden where Shakespeare probably wrote many of his plays. And he said they were very popular at the time for garlands and nosegays. You know, there was a lot of manure in the streets and such, and it was nice to have something, a nice scent. And he recommended, for a do get the medicinal uses, he recommended the violets be used for their flower, beauty, and variety of color, and exquisite form, do bring to a liberal and gentle manly mind the remembrance of honesty, comeliness, and all sorts of virtues. For it would be an unseemly and filthy thing, as certainly a wise man saith, for him that doth look upon and handle fair and beautiful things, and who frequenteth and is conversant with the fair and beautiful places, to have his mind not fair, but filthy and deformed. Well, I love that. I mean, what a nice reason to have some pretty good-smelling flowers around you. It will prevent you from having a filthy and deformed mind. So, the medicinal uses, he said, the flowers are good for all inflammations, especially the sides and the lungs. They take away the hoarseness of the chest, the ruggedness of the windpipe and jaw, and allay the extreme heat of the liver, kidney, and bladders. Mitigate the fiery heat of burning agues or fevers. Temper the sharpness of choler and take away thirst. But there is an oil made of violets, which is likewise cold and moist, the same being anointed upon the testicles, doth gently provoke sleep, which is hindered by a hot and dry distemper. Never heard of that before, don't know anything about it, and wonder how he figured that out. Anyway, mixed or labored together in a wooden dish with the yolk of an egg, it assuageth the pain of the fundament and the hemorrhoids. It is likewise good to be put into cooling clysters and made into poultices that cool and ease pain. But let the oil and the violets which be steeped be either of unripe olives, this was an oil made from unripe olives, sweet almonds, because he said that was the best. The latter physicians do think it good to mix dry violets with medicines that are a comfort to strengthen the heart. The leaves of violets taken inwardly do cool and moisten and make the belly soluble. Being outwardly applied, they mitigate all kinds of hot inflammations, both taken by themselves and also applied with barley flour dried at the fire, soaked in water, lain upon a hot stomach. That's just sort of the old Greek tradition we talked about before with the polenta. He repeats a lot of the old Greek stuff, and he talks about the syrup made of violet flowers, which good for the stomach, good for coughs and everything. Very popular. It's a sugar syrup made with violet flowers. It smells great, tasty. It was very popular in desserts as well. And sugared violets, we've mentioned. Violets good against hot fevers and inflammation of the liver. Again, they have salicin. So, syrup of violets good for inflammation of the lungs and breast, against pleurisy and cough, against fevers and agues in young children. He said it was good for inflammation of the throat, mouth, uvula, and for the falling evil in the children. Again, that's like an epilepsy of some sort. I don't know how that works or if it does, but this is 500 years after the first writer mentioned it, so maybe it does. I don't know. Actually, it's 1,500 years. Yeah, he wrote in the 1500s, and we started with, Pliny the Elder. So anyway, about 100 years after him, Culpeper said that violets are cooling and are used to cool any heat or distemper of the body, either inwardly or outwardly, such as inflammation of the eyes, the matrix, it's actually the womb, or fundament, imposthumes also, and hot swellings. To drink the decoction of the leaves and flowers made with water or in wine, or to apply the poultice to grieved places, it eases pains in the head, especially caused by tiredness or want of sleep, and any other pains arising from heat, being applied in the same manner, or with oil of roses. Let's see if he has anything new here. He liked it infused in wine, said to help the quinsy and falling sickness in children. Again, so now we're 1,600 years after that first recommendation. The flower, while they are fresh, the flowers... he thought they were better when they were dry and were effectual against pleurisy and all diseases of the lungs, hot rheums, hoarseness of the throat. heat and sharpness of the urine, and all the pains of the back and brains or kidneys and bladder. Also good for the liver and for jaundice, all hot agues or fevers to cool heat, quench thirst. Syrup of violet is used most and better effect. Um, Thereby powerful to cool heat, quench thirst. Taken in claret wine, makes a fine tart relish, pleasing to the taste. Interesting. And he actually recommended a lot of cordials and drinks people were making with that lavender syrup, which would probably be delicious, actually. You can make lavender ice cream. That's pretty awesome. That syrup, that's really good. Uh, Anyway, what did I say lavender? I meant violet. Yeah, we're talking violets. Purple. Got them mixed up. So in the, yeah, you don't want lavender in your ice cream. It's bitter. But violet would be really nice. So John Keogh tells us of the use of violets in Irish herbal medicine. In 1735, he said, March violet, that was Viola martina purpurea, has a cold, moist nature. Decoction of syrup is good against fever, inflammations of the liver and lungs, and useful against coughs and pleurisy. Especially applied is good for abscesses and inflammation, and the seed breaks up kidney stones. In more modern use, British use, Maud Grieve gave many different violets. She talks about a lot of the history, mentioned by Homer and Virgil, and we've already covered so much history. I'm just going to skip ahead. She mentions that a wine made with infused violet flowers was a favorite drink of the Romans, which it was. The syrup of violets we've discussed. She said at this time in the 1930s, violet was still found in the British pharmacopoeia. Violet flowers possess a slightly laxative property, and the syrup of violets was used as a mild laxative, which was, English cooking being what it was very useful, very important. And gosh, there's so many different things that it was used for. Actually, it was used for cancers of the tongue. Yeah, that syrup or the violet steeped in wine, used in various sprays for hoarseness of the throat. A lot of singers and actors and such would use a violet spray for their throat. She mentions an ointment which could be used for sores and boils and everything. So we've covered a lot of that. Native American herbalism. Tismal Crow, who's a medicine man in the Muskogee tribe, one of the best modern Native American herbal books, recommended violets as an accelerator, meaning that they help other herbs in their action. He recommended violets for bladder pain, prolapsed bladder, prolapsed uterus, boils, carbuncles, pus-filled sores, swollen glands, as an antiseptic, for cold sores, as an emetic to induce vomiting, or to prevent gagging. For morning sickness, that would be smaller or larger doses. Stomach pain, diarrhea. For the heart, if it's slow and sluggish. For angina, for cancer and cancer pain. Pleurisy, bronchitis, coughs. As an expectorant for varicose veins, to increase lactation. For chapped lips and skin lotions. And as a wild edible. So, man, I mean, that veritable panacea there. And I really do. I like his book a lot. It's some Muskogee herbal book. The eclectics used, let's see, Viola odorata. The leaves and flowers, demulcent, emollient, and laxative, used with advantage in affections of the respiratory and urinary organs. Viola tricolor pansy possesses similar properties, mucilaginous, emollient, laxative, and useful in diseases of children. King's Medical Dispensatory of 1898. It was official medicine. They go in through a lot of how to identify it and the chemical compositions. It's really too in the weeds for us right now, but medicinal uses and dosage. Odorata acts as a laxative, especially combined with sugar and water, so making it the syrup again. Flowers have caused faintness and giddiness in one case. Who knows? I never noticed anything like that. The seeds have been recommended in uric acid gravel. Blue violet is mucilaginous, emollient, slightly laxative. Also antisyphilitic and useful when combined with cordalis formosa in syphilis. Has been used in pectoral, nephritic, and cutaneous affections, especially crustulactia. The plant should be used when fresh. Well, they say fresh is just drying destroys its active principles, so that's different. Professor Scudder says that it stimulates waste and secretion, relieves nervous irritability, and improves nutrition. Interesting. They list a lot of related species that can be used interchangeably. Wow, yeah. Plants for Future says Sweet Violet has a long and proven history of folk use, especially in the treatment of cancer and whooping cough. It contains salicylic acid, which is used to make aspirin. It is therefore effective in the treatment of headaches, migraines, and insomnia. The whole plant is anti-inflammatory, diaphoretic, emollient, expectorant, and laxative. It is taken in the treatment of bronchitis, respiratory catarrh, coughs, asthma, and cancer of the breast, lungs, and digestive tract. Externally, it is used to treat the mouth and for throat infections. The plant can be used fresh or harvested when it comes into flower and dried for later use. The flowers are an emulsant and emollient. They are used in the treatment of biliousness and lung troubles. The petals are made into a syrup and used in the treatment of infantile disorders. The root is a much stronger expectorant than the other parts of the plant, but they also contain an alkaloid, violin, which at higher doses is strongly emetic and purgative. They are gathered in the autumn and dried for later use. The seeds are diuretic and purgative. They have been used in the treatment of urinary complaints and are considered to be a good remedy for gravel or stones. A homeopathic remedy is made from the whole fresh plant and is considered useful in treatment of spasmodic coughs and rheumatism of the wrist. Essential oils from the flowers used in aromatherapy for bronchial complaints, exhaustion, and skin complaints. And, oddly enough, there's very little mention among American schools of medicine these days of violet. The reason is certainly not that violets aren't useful or an excellent herb. I guess violets are just too unassuming. I agree that the Russian writer Igor Vilovich Zevin said the violet flower is like a pretty smile. All varieties just seem to brighten our days, coming and going with the seasons. And I think violets are just taken for granted these days, much like Veronica we talked about last week. You go to a modern herbal school, you're probably not going to learn a lot about violets or Veronica. But if you get my books or listen to my podcast or get my newsletter, you're going to learn more than you could ever imagine, right? I mean, you got to admit that was like drinking from a fire hose, but you'll never look at violets the same again. They are really one of my favorite herbs and absolutely one of my favorite flowers. So y'all, have a great week. I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Be sure to include plenty of medicinal herbs in your Thanksgiving meal. I did a whole show on that about 2 years ago, maybe 3. One of the first shows, actually, so probably 4 years ago. Go back in the archives for the podcast here. And it's specifically the Thanksgiving show, herbs to be used in cooking. And you can really help keep your family healthy and try to avoid some colds and flus. And a lot of these herbs aid with digestion as well, so people be a lot more comfortable and really more able to enjoy their Thanksgiving meal. Anyway, y'all, have a great one. I'll talk to you next time.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, for your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.